G'day everyone, Dikko here with another kick-ass time lapse. Today I am modeling the one and only Ragnar Lothbrok. And the reason I'm doing this is because as I was getting into the rigging tutorials, I realized that, holy shit, I don't have a model to rig to. So this model will become free for anyone who wishes to download it, play with it, and learn how to rig with it. Bear in mind though, this is a pretty high res rig. That means there's a lot of things to consider, like multi-res modifiers, there's hair sims, there's a little bit of cloth if you want to use it. There's all kinds of things you can try out and play with. And if it's a little bit too heavy for you, take the time to down res it a little bit maybe. And you don't need the resolution. It's just there because I made a really complicated character. So this will become handy when we start to learn about what to consider about a piece of geometry when we start to rig, higher res stuff such as this. So I think it's useful, and I've kept it there for your benefit. And if you wish to play around with it, break it, and do whatever you wish with it. So this is the time lapse of me creating Ragnar. And as you can see, it's not going to be a complete likeness. It's fairly stylized. Consider it more of a homage, if you will, of the actor that plays him. So as you can see, the actual caricature that I worked with is really different to the end result once I get through it. So in fact, I've probably gone through, several of his sons in likeness as I was making this model. So for a good chunk of the time, it looked like Ube. So rather than me talk about the technical stuff going through the process, I'm just going to talk about my experience going through the creation of this character, because in all honesty, it was a bit of a pain in the ass to get through for a number of reasons, mainly because of the armor set he was wearing. I wanted to go with the iconic sort of Ragnar look, so his sort of season 2 and 3 look, which I didn't realize had also the most complicated armor on his chest plate there. Specifically the chainmail. I didn't actually get around to doing the final look of that. It was just too much of a pain in the ass. I tried simulating it, I tried modeling it, I tried texturing it. It just didn't look right. So I ended up going with a standard material from Substance Painter with the armor, for instance. Another thing is that really grinded my gears down to a halt was the actual sculpting process. So I actually sculpted out a base sculpt to re-topo over for the entire body except for the hands. And it just reinforced the fact that I don't enjoy doing that at all. I really prefer just to model it from a base mesh from scratch and then sort of sculpt in details using a multi-res. Not sure why I enjoy it this way. I think it's just faster. I mean, I ended up really doing twice the amount of work than I could have done. If I just started with a regular modeling technique, traditional style, I think I would have got through this model way, way faster. That being said, a lot of people enjoy just modeling out or just sculpting out the entire mesh. But for me, it's just not my kind of thing. I really don't enjoy doing it. It just slows down your computer. It gives you unnecessary levels of overhead. It's just a pain in the ass. So I've learned that going forward for most of my models going forward, at least with new characters that I do in the future, I'll probably at least go with the same method I went with in the tutorials that I made a few months ago. Basically, sculpt out the head, but leave the body to a straight up, traditional style modeling technique. I think it's better. I think it's faster. And I like the process a lot more. It's just much more relaxing in my opinion. And with that in mind, I want to pose a question to you guys. Would you be interested if I were to do a short 2 or 3 episode series on modeling traditionally? So when I say modeling traditionally, I mean without any sculpting base mesh bullshit. So instead of you having to retopo on top of a higher res mesh, we're basically gonna just straight up model a character in a traditional sense using some reference images, orthographic images that will just sort of trace using traditional modeling techniques. So this is great for those who have maybe a slower computer on hand, who don't have the ability to, deal with high resolution, high poly counts, even when sculpting. So for instance, if you want to make a lower res character or work in lower res and just get the performance you need, that could be useful. So if you are interested in that idea, let me know in the comments, and I'll arrange that to happen after the rigging tutorial series is up. I think it could be really useful for you guys. So yeah, let me know. And as you can see here, I'm just going through the hands. Just smashing out a pretty basic hand topology. I'm not going to do anything fancy here, and I'm less likely to be all that concerned on edge flow and stuff, because it's just a hand that's detached from the body. It's not going to be connected in any way. It's just going to sit inside the sleeve, and this is what makes it a little bit different in nature to the previous video series when it comes to character design. You can kind of break a lot more rules when all the body parts are separated. You can kind of have a higher poly count on a hand, for instance, than you would otherwise, or you don't have to deal so much about anatomy, flow and stuff, especially around the elbows and knees and stuff, because the clothes are pretty loose, so you don't have to worry about getting those elbow loops in there, stuff like that. And plus, I'm just dealing with just smashing out a character as fast as possible, so I'm less concerned about it as well. So you may be wondering why I actually bothered making that base mesh to begin with, so the whole body. And the actual answer is just to really smash out the proportions of the body. I didn't really need to do that. I felt like I needed to at the time, because I was just doing a character that I haven't done in a while, or haven't done a semi-realistic, or I don't know, haven't based a character off an actual actor in a long time. So I thought it might have been a good idea. In retrospect, I think it could have been a waste of time. If I just had used just basic building blocks to just smash out the overall proportions, I think it would have been all right. Moving on to the actual screen here, as you can see, I'm just sculpting in folds. I tried using the fancy pants cloth brush stuff in 2.9, and I just didn't really like it. It was a bit slow, especially when you're using multi-res. It works really, really well with lower res meshes though. But that being said, just to smash out the folds in this sort of stylized effect, I don't think it was very useful. So I just ended up just doing it old-fashioned way, just sculpting in folds where I think it was most prominent. And I think it worked out pretty good. I was pretty happy with the effect. And the new tools just for basic sculpting in Blender have been really useful as well. So being able to sharpen up edges and stuff is way easier than it used to be. And when you're sculpting in a more, I guess, traditional sense, and with multi-res, I think the performance is much better as well. It's way faster. And you can see here, the face looks completely different than the end result. I'm still trying to knock out the face proportions, even with the sculpt underlying. I just wasn't happy with it. I tried pushing the proportions to match the cartoony version that I have in the picture there, but it just didn't look good in 3D in my opinion. So I ended up going with something a bit more slightly realistic in the end. And you'll see that at the end as I start to play with the proportions and stuff. There's a few tricks you can actually do to sort of make your life easier when it comes to fixing up proportions. And one of those tricks is to use the Lattice Modifier. And I use that a lot. You might not see it in the time lapse because it's moving so fast. But the Lattice Modifier allows you to just really quickly just fix up basic proportions, and especially around the face and stuff like that. So give that a go. Look up the Lattice Modifier. It's really, really useful. Other modifiers that I use a lot is the Solidify Modifier. So I use that for pretty much any clothing that I do. I don't like to model in thickness. I just use the modifiers and then turn them off and on as I need to. I think it's much more fun that way and much more useful. And you can always bake that out when you export it out to as an FBX or something like that for another software. So yeah, it also saves on performance. So Solidify modifiers are your friend. Multi-res is your friend if you want to add more detail for like folds and stuff. Really good for that. And if you have to model in stuff traditionally, it's really useful just to do it manually. Just for instance, the heels of these shoes and boots. I'm not going to sculpt that shit. May as well just model it in. I can model in the folds though pretty easily. As long as the topology is pretty clean, you can probably get away with anything like that. So this is my lazy ass way to model in the signature crow or raven into his armor. Just cut the goddamn thing out of a photo. It's like, and it's usually the same image as a texture if you have to. Great for just convert it to black and white if you want to add some bump, and you're good to go. It was really hard to find some decent high-res production photos of Ragnar here. I don't think I found any, to be honest. This was the closest one I had, and I think it was just fine for what I needed. But if I wanted to get that armor in there properly, like the actual, like the chainmail armor, which is really intricate in this detail, I would have needed a higher res image, I think. Here I go with the beard, and you can see I was fucking around with it for quite a while, and I wasn't happy with it. And then I thought, wait a minute, what if I just let gravity do its thing? And you can see I'll reset the entire beard process. You can see it almost looks like a Greek god there instead of a Viking vandal with all the curls. But you can see here I end up using just dynamics to make the beard fall properly. And with a bit of vertex painting to, not vertex painting, vertex weight painting to determine the length of the beard, I was able to get the look that I wanted without really having to sculpt or groom the hair. I just basically let gravity and physics do the work. And we'll encounter some issues in the future when we start to rig this character with those dynamics, because there's no real way to set the hair once you've added dynamics. You can't just say apply the dynamics. You just have to maybe convert it to a curve and then reapply it as hair. So that's a bit of an issue. Unless we want to keep the dynamics. I'm not sure yet. We'll have to figure out how we can do that with our rigging tutorials. So that will probably be one of the latest stage tutorials on how to do that. And as you can see, I'm just trying to figure out how to do the hair with Ragnar. And his hair is actually really complicated. Getting those sort of braids in there is almost impossible. And in the end, you see, I kind of give up and just go with, I'm just going to go with scraggly combed hair. I'm not going to do the braids. Fuck the braids. And in the future, I'll probably try and teach myself how to do that in a little bit more detail, but I'm not a hair specialist. That's the thing. I'm more of a generalist when it comes to that stuff. So, each time I do it, I get a little bit better, but in this case, I'm just going to keep it simple. So we're rounding off this time lapse with a bit of unwrapping, and we're going to jump into texturing. And I use Substance Painter for this guy because, well, firstly, it's just way faster. Secondly, it has all the resources I need. So armor sets, leathers, you name it, it's all there. There's no chance I'm going to go sourcing all those different things online. It will just take forever. And it's also reminded me on how I need to, or how I want to eventually create a Substance Painter series as well. So a very basic one, but one that will get you started and get you creating some really cool stuff really quickly. Remind me about that in the future. As you can see here, I tried to model in the actual armor. It actually turned out really well. It turned out really, really good for most part. That being said, the borders of his chainmail armor is lined with a leather strap. So the actual edges, the hemming of the armor is lined with leather, and getting that to overlap with the chainmail was just such a pain in the ass. I couldn't get it to look right. It looked so amateurish. So in the end, I just ended up saying fuck it, jump into Substance and just make a placeholder chainmail armor. In the future, though, I want to do this properly. I think if I do another sort of medieval style character and I want an intricate chainmail armor such as what you see here, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. That being said, I'm pretty sure, you see it all the time, but if I were to do this in ZBrush, I think it's probably like a one-click solution solved sort of thing. But in Blender, it's a little bit more complicated, I think, at least at this stage. But I did think of a method. I did discover a method that could help me create sort of cloth-like effect with the chainmail. And I'm going to upload a video in the next day or so on this method that I did with a live stream today. So it's a really cool method. And I think for getting yourself 90% of the way there with chainmail with actual dynamics, like cloth dynamics with chainmail, without the massive overhead, I think this is the way to go. And you can see me experiment with that method here. And it wasn't quite successful here because I'm doing different kinds of things, but I did find a method that would work really well. And I can't wait to show you that. You can see here, I've tried everything. I tried skin wraps, I tried lattices, I've tried cloth, and this is where the thing kind of worked out in the end. Using cloth really worked with a skin deform modifier. And I didn't end up going with it, obviously, but it's given me ideas. Many, many ideas. And this is the great thing about doing fan art or just doing practice stuff like this, is that you discover new things or discover old methods that could be repurposed in different ways. And I think this is one of those times. So I'm always learning just as much as you are, learning new things, trying new things, always, break things if you have to. Like you see here, I've completely broken the armor there. I'm just cutting things out, just trying things with this method. And I think, yeah, there's potential here. There's so much potential. And oh man, it looks so good. The render looks so good. Too bad I couldn't use it. And this is what I meant by the leather lining looking a bit crummy. It just looked lame. Oh well, next time. And finally, just some last minute preparation for exporting out the substance. And surprisingly, as always, there's always some issue when it comes to importing the substance, mainly to do with the UV layout, especially when it comes to UDIM layout. So be aware of that in the future. And here you can see I'm just scrolling through as many leather materials as I could find to use for Ragnar. And I just, slap them on. And then I add a few extra tweaks here and there. And, eventually I'll add more and more detail as I, flesh out the color scheme and get the right sort of detail I want and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's the same process as in Blender. Just work your way into complexity. Don't start with complexity. Just block out, then add things as you go along. And despite the fact that Adobe now owns this goddamn software, it is actually worth the money. I lament the day when it will become completely ingrained into the Creative Cloud. But for now, it's absolutely worth the $35 a month. Seriously. For the library alone, honestly, you're worth paying the monthly fee, in my opinion. And here's the final result. I hope you like it. I guess you can say it was fun making this guy. I wish it was more fun. I wish I didn't make as many mistakes. But in the future, I think I will have taken all that into consideration. And I think the next time I do something like this, it will be a lot more fun and the result will probably be a bit better. That being said, I'm pretty happy with the final result. Even if it doesn't look like Ragnar, it's inspired by Ragnar. And that's all that matters for me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this time lapse. And we're going to use this guy in our next video, which is going to be super cool, which is going to be all about blocking out our initial character rig skeleton. So that's going to be super fun to do. Can't wait to tell you how to do it. So until then, catches and have fun.